everybody. It's so good to see you here for week 4, our final lesson on healthy living as God intended. And I'm sorry that we can't be there in person this week, but we're totally there in prayer, and I'll be there very soon, shortly after. So, and I have a special guest here that I'd like to introduce to you, and this is Melody.
Hi.
Melody. Well, Melody and I have had a lot of conversations about health in recent weeks. The greatest thing about having Melody here is that her expertise is our topic of discussion today. And today we're going to talk about gut health. We're going to talk about poop and what that tells us about our gut health. And the thing with gut health is I think that we talk about health in healthcare, but we don't often, I think, consider the hierarchy of the different systems in our body and their influence on overall health. That's what landed me into neurology, but that's also what landed you into gut health.
Yes.
To also get to neurology in a way.
Yes, absolutely. They're very interconnected.
Yeah. So I'm going to let Melody in a second tell you a little bit about her story and why she became the specialist that she is now. In just a second. But first, I just want to touch on a couple things. And one of them is I realize how overwhelming the last 4 weeks have been. You know, you're getting all sorts of information and realizing how easy it is to get it wrong when it comes to diet and health, and how many things need to change. And it's too much to change it all overnight. And so we've got to start in small steps. And so the best advice I can give is take small habits. You could maybe start with one new habit and grow it, and then add another habit and grow it. Don't feel like it all has to be perfect overnight. And so the other thing too that I want to touch on today is, as we talk about gut health and as really health overall, physical and spiritual, there are, of course, many mentions in the Bible about the importance of taking care of our temple. God gave us this gift of our bodies. I believe that God also made us for a specific purpose. There are things that we can do in this life in a way that no one else can do, the way that He's designed us to do. And so in order to really fulfill that purpose, we need to make sure that we take good care of our physical health as well as spiritual health. Now, with that being said, there are some mentions of this in the Bible, and one of them that stands out, and it's kind of a surprise that I didn't mention it until now, but that is Daniel. You know, I think everybody's heard of the Daniel diet. The cool thing that happened there is Daniel, of course, was captured by the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, and him and his people, the Israelites. But Daniel and his friends were selected as some of the absolute best possible servants. You know, they were the top of the top. And the king made sure that they would be fed the king's food, right? Because he wanted to make sure that these servants would have their full capability and the best chance at serving at the very best. However, Daniel and his friends had a different idea in mind, because when they looked at the king's food, they realized that this is a lot of stuff that's not healthy for our body and for our mind. And so they said, can you allow us to just eat vegetables and water, or plant-based food and water? And of course, the first response was no. So they had to prove that if they ate healthy food, not only would it make them better physically, but mentally and in every way. And so they got approved to do a 10-day test. And after 10 days, they looked better, they were stronger, they were healthier, and they were granted permission to eat vegetables or plant-based diet and water only, no alcohol. And after 3 years of training, they were at the very top of really, I think, compared to their peers and overall function. Now, the question that I have for you, I just want you to ponder on this for a second. Do you think that Daniel ate healthy purely for physical health? Or was it also for spiritual health? And I'm not giving you an answer here. Just think about that, because as you read scripture, there's a whole lot more focus on spiritual health than there is on physical health. And now, one other thing to consider is fasting. And fasting is mentioned more than 50 times in the Bible. And that's something that we're going to talk a little bit about, because I'm really interested to know what happens to our gut, which really is that primary barrier to our entire body when we fast. What goes on when we fast? And now, of course, there's not just food fasting in the Bible. They talk about fasting, which is abstaining from other things as well. But there certainly is an aspect of fasting from food, and there are some health benefits associated with that. So we'll talk about that. Now, one thing that I learned from Melody is that we've heard about prebiotics, we've heard about probiotics, but then I've heard about postbiotics. And that's a whole new world to consider, and that's a lot of what we're going to talk about. So as we begin, Melody, can you give us just a little window into your story, neurologically, and then why you got into gut health? Because I think that's something people can relate to.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, my name is Melody. I'm so happy to be here today to talk to you guys about my passion in the gut microbiome. My journey in focusing on the gut microbiome started 9.5 years ago when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And during that time, I was in school and I was trying to figure out why this happened, what dysfunction made me prone to having this disease. And so as a result of my research and my investigation in the time of my life that I had likely developed the condition, it was a time where I was on a lot of antibiotics, and I clearly had a lot of the symptoms that we'll talk about today of dysbiosis, meaning that my gut microbiome is out of whack. It's not healthy. It's not serving me. And I started focusing on my gut microbiome and really rehabilitating that environment. And I dedicated my life to it and went and studied microbiology and cell science at a master's level. And I have been relapse free for 9.5 years, just really controlling and regulating my immune system, which largely inhabits our gut.
And that's amazing.
Thank you.
Because that was your focus, was focusing on, what if I change my gut health? Mm-hmm. How would that affect you neurologically?
Right.
How would that affect your immune system? I would imagine you noticed change like every way, at all levels.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, just a clarity that I didn't even realize was missing, right? Just from the imbalances that I was having.
So what, can you explain what is microbiome?
Yeah. So our bodies are covered on the outside and on the inside with different microorganisms. These are bacteria, viruses, fungi, archaea, and they make up our oral microbiome, our skin microbiome. For women, it's the vaginal microbiome. And in all of us, it is our gut microbiome. And that is the biggest concentration and the most well-studied microbiome in the human body. And that is located in our large intestine. And we're talking trillions of bacteria. We're trillions of microorganisms that are in there doing work for us. But the question is, are we doing the work for them that they need?
So, and that's, I think you bring up a really awesome point there. So there's trillions of bacteria. Mm-hmm. Most of them, hopefully most of them are friendly, mm-hmm. right? We need them. We want them there.
We do.
But there are some too that if they overgrow, mm-hmm. Could be harmful as well.
Absolutely.
And so what makes them either good for us or bad for us? Is it what they secrete that has the impact on our immune system?
Yes.
And that can kind of make that difference, right, between, is it secreting something that is good for our bodies and helping our bodies versus something that is harming it?
Right. And a lot of that has to do with what are we putting into it. And so based on what we're putting in, those pathogenic or opportunistic bacteria, which are really the not so good ones, but we need them there in order for there to be an ecosystem. We just don't want them to be in charge. And so when we start feeding those bacteria and they're able to be in charge, their metabolites, which are the postbiotics, essentially it's what they're producing as a byproduct of what they're eating. They are either going to help promote our intestinal lining or they're going to degrade the intestinal lining. Why that's so important when it comes to our immunity is that our 70% of our immune system is in the gut. And, you know, what does that mean exactly? It's because we have B cells and T cells, which are immune cells, that are in the lymphoid tissue in our gut, and they are there to screen for things that might be bad, right? So when you eat something that our body knows, oh, that's just some kale, that's some strawberries, no big deal, it's going to kind of sniff it out and say, we're okay with this. But when you eat McDonald's and there's chemicals in there and preservatives in there that it doesn't know, it starts signaling this, something's not okay. And that's going to really cause a lot of that inflammation and effect on the immune system.
So I want to take a step back again and go back to the story of Daniel for a moment. I think it's really interesting that what's mentioned in there is plant-based or vegetables and water. The reason why it's so interesting to me is I don't know if you recall our very first session talking about sugar, and I said the hero of the story is fiber, because fiber is what allows to bind to that fructose, carry it way down the line, and feed it to our bacteria. And so with that being said, in this story, you know, plant-based foods are rich in fiber. And my question for you is, if we took all the fiber out of a diet, which we would end up with the standard American diet.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that's what that's called.
What's the consequence of that? Because here Daniel is saying, I need the fiber. I want as much of it as possible.
Right.
And it seems like, in my experience, fiber seems to play a really critical role in our gut health. Like it's vital, it's crucial.
Yeah.
And we're so used to thinking of food as fiberless food that whenever we think of, well, eat vegetables and fruit, that's what God made. He made it for us. They're rich in fiber. And when we think about that, we think once in a while I can have that, but I don't, like I say we, I mean most people.
Right.
That's not what people think anymore as this is food, this is our diet, right? Yeah. I was called out at church after one of those weeks. I won't name any names, but like saying that I potentially have a eating disorder because that's what I live on.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's what we're meant to live on. The thing is, we've gone away now from understanding and feeling that this is what normal is.
Correct.
Okay, so can you help us a little bit understanding the role of fiber? And hopefully we can start thinking more when we eat food, is there fiber in there?
Yeah.
Or no, right? Because the more processed it is, that fiber just, that's removed.
It gets gone.
Right.
Yeah, it's completely removed. If we take a step back to the beginning of our lives, you know, the first food that we're given when we come into the world is milk. And in human breast milk, the most abundant composition is fiber. And when researchers studied breast milk, they were like, why is there so much fiber? That's not for our cells. Why does the baby need so much fiber? And it was 200 different forms of fiber that they found was to feed the baby's gut microbiome to help it start to grow, because it knew that baby's eventually going to start eating food, and those bacteria are going to need to be there to digest that food. That just shows you how intrinsically important fiber is to our existence. Even as an infant, it's the biggest composition in our food, and it needs to continue to be, because it's those fibers that is the food for the bacteria. So when you want to talk about the relationship between us and the bacteria, we are giving them fiber, they're digesting that fiber, and they're giving us metabolites like short chain fatty acids, which are the postbiotics. That's going to help us regulate our mood. It's going to help us regulate our immune system. It's going to help you regulate your metabolism and being prone to conditions like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. So it's really a trade. And what we need to give to them is fiber. And this is fiber that's coming from the earth, from our fruits, from our vegetables, specifically, that we need to be consuming. And if we're only doing that once a week, think about the integrity of your system. If you're feeling sluggish, if you're fatigued, if you're having rashes, and if your immune system is kind of out of whack, are you giving the bacteria the fiber that they need to function properly? That's really the question.
Yeah, so I thank you for bringing up postbiotics again, because I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So thank you for kind of opening up this whole new world for me of understanding. It's not something that I've really ever put too much thought into, and now I can't let it go. So you were mentioning metabolites, things that are produced by these bacteria that are then excreted for our bodies to use to our benefit. Vitamins, minerals, enzymes. I mean, there's just a wide variety of them. We need those things. Right. And I believe that a lot of the supplements that we take, that's what they are, right? They're made through a bacterial process. And, you know,
they taught us how to make them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But some of the benefits here, I've just listed some of the benefits, and I know the list is longer, but benefits of postbiotics. They can help boost the immune system. They can help reduce digestive symptoms. They can help prevent and treat diarrhea. They can help with allergies, weight loss, lower the risk of heart disease, manage blood sugar levels. They can have anti-tumor properties, and it can help with sleep. And I'm sure, again, there are many more things.
Yeah,
but anyway, that kind of gives you an idea. Wow, you know, let's just start, when we eat, let's start thinking more and more about what is this that I'm consuming going to do to the trillions of living bacteria in my gut that are critical for my health. You mentioned skin earlier. I mean, we went through like 4 years of severely over-sanitizing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I I never even go near any kind of antibacterial, the hand sanitizer, I can't stand them.
Yeah, they're sterile.
So we need that healthy bacteria, right?
Yeah.
It's actually good to go play in the dirt and keep your hands dirty a little extra long, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. We need that outside microbial environment too. It's what we were evolved with, you know. We need them in order. It's the same thing as like having the bacteria on our vegetables. You know, sometimes we over clean our vegetables, but we get a large amount of our B12 from those bacteria that are residual. Now, I'm not saying don't wash your vegetables. I'm just saying with this mentality of over sanitizing, we're kind of removing the mindset of the importance of that ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'm going to send you guys a link to the Environmental Working Group, which has great information on pesticides. And like if you're going to eat fruit or vegetables that are not organic, that have these chemicals on them, these pesticides that ruin your internal lining, your gut flora, like which ones are the ones to absolutely avoid? You know, there are some we just cannot afford to consume, and they have a list of Dirty Dozen.
Yeah.
So if you do a search online, the Dirty Dozen Environmental Working Group, you'll find it, but I'll send you the link anyway. So in there, strawberries and apples and spinach, those are really high on the list. Peaches, pears, grapes, and the list goes on. I'll send it to you. For now, let's go back to prebiotics a little bit. We talked about fiber. I'm assuming that fits in as a prebiotic, right?
Yeah, that is the prebiotic.
Yeah, prebiotics are the food to feed bacteria. So probiotics are the bacteria. The prebiotic is what they feed on, and the postbiotics are what they excrete, and that are things that our body, metabolites that our body really needs and relies on for survival.
Right.
And, you know, we can end up with skin conditions. We can end up with all sorts of immune issues if we don't have that healthy microbiome balance, which our immune system relies on so heavily.
Yeah.
But not just the immune system, the brain too. Because there's a connection.
Oh, yeah.
And it's solid, right?
It's
strong
solid.
connection.
Yeah.
I realized that after college when I changed my diet because I was so I felt like I was in a fog, like it was hard for me to focus and concentrate. And I went through a liver cleanse, and then changed my diet. And I thought, oh my goodness, could it already make a difference? Within 24 hours, I was clear-minded, and I thought, I should have, if I could have done that before college and not after, it would have been so much easier, you know? But that's the kind of information that I was seeking, because as a child, I had all sorts of issues with skin health and with poor energy. I mean, I had cardiovascular problems. I had, surgery, heart surgery, but I had a lot of other problems that I knew were there. I couldn't put a name to it, and I didn't know how to fix them. So I wanted to get into healthcare to understand, how can I solve this problem? These problems that I could feel emerging in me. Right. And so,
I agree. I mean, you bring up the gut-brain axis, which is like really the forefront of my thesis work and what I'm personally passionate about, because I believe my gut affected my brain and my spinal cord, which is where the neurodegeneration is in multiple sclerosis. So what's really interesting is we know a lot about how our nervous system in the gut is being manipulated by the bacteria to affect our central nervous system, our autonomic nervous system, right? Really controlling, are you in flight or flight, or are you in rest and digest, right? And these metabolites, the short chain fatty acids that the bacteria are producing, are delegating whether or not we need to be in fight or flight or rest and digest. And, it's such an easy thing to be able to control if you give it enough fiber, which is recommended, 25 to 40 grams a day. Are you getting 25 to 40 grams a day of fiber? When you look at a week, if you only had a salad one time, you likely didn't get enough to feed the trillions of bacteria that need the fiber in order to give you those metabolites to kind of calm the system down. And this is like with the skin, this comes back down to intestinal permeability, right? So we want to protect the lining of our gut. And that's so important because the lining of the gut was designed to be protective, right? It has these tight junctions, which are cells that really inhibit anything to go through it, because, you don't want those gastric juices and that fecal matter to be leaking into your lymphatics or into your bloodstream. But when you don't give the bacteria that fiber, they're not able to maintain the intestinal integrity. And so then you kind of get this leaking, right? And that's the leaky gut, which is going to give inflammation. But the other barrier that is suffering is our skin barrier, and very similarly to the intestinal barrier, because they're made of very similar cells. And so when you look at things like psoriasis and eczema, these are really metabolic manifestations of inflammation that are likely starting in the gut.
When we fast, what did those bacteria feed on?
It's a great question. So the bad bacteria have nothing to feed on.
Okay.
And you have the good bacteria, which are Bifidobacterium or Lactobacilli predominantly, they don't really need us as much. They need us to give them fiber eventually, but they can really do enough work without us for some time. And they were designed to do work without us for some time. So it gives them an opportunity to go in and repair some of those intestinal barrier leakages. It says, okay, good, you got this guy out of the way, you calmed him down, so now I can focus on repair, cell turnover. And the amount of postbiotics, which are the short chain fatty acids, go up exponentially because those health promoting bacteria they have the time to do their job. They're not inundated with a turkey wrap and then some chips and then some popcorn and the constant grazing. It gives them a pause to actually rest and digest, which is going to put you in that sympathetic, that parasympathetic nervous system state. And without those periods of fasting, which is why God has made sure to intrinsically tie that into our study as human beings, to say you need this. And we know that the cell, and it's the same thing with when you sleep, right? Why is it that the gut microbiome impacts our sleep? Well, if you eat too close to bedtime, or if you eat a ton of sugar during the day, the body is going to be dealing with that kind of waste overload versus producing melatonin, which is made in the gut, serotonin, 90% made in the gut. And you need those two in order to calm down and go to sleep, right? Mm-hmm. And if you start feeding the candida, which are the yeast in the it's the predominant genus of yeast in our ecosystem, they're going to start sending out signals to the brain, give me more sugar. I like this. Give me more sugar. And the guys who are there to protect and digest, they're kind of silenced. And so fasting gives them an opportunity to come out, do their job, because the other guys aren't being fed by bad food.
That's great. It's amazing because fasting, is mentioned in the Bible so many times. Mm-hmm. Jesus fasted for 40 days, and the purpose is to get us closer to God, right? It's to have that intimate, closer relationship, maybe I think it's an act of humility in a way, just to demonstrate that, we obviously are in need of you, God, and what you've created for us, but I love hearing you talk about what's happening, because it is cleansing.
Yeah, it's very cleansing.
And it takes away a lot of the distractions from within mm-hmm. that create, I think, some of the urges that we have, mm-hmm. To want more sugar, to want more food, and then feed these bad bacteria.
Right.
So it's eliminating all of that. Mm-hmm. It's allowing us to get past it.
Right.
So how cool that is. Yeah, very that's cool. Great. So can you give us, kind of touch on a couple things? Mm-hmm. One would be, what are some things that we can do with our diet? Like of course, we talked about fiber. If we want to impact our gut health, are there certain foods that we want to have, consume more of mm-hmm. to promote this gut health? Of course, we know sugar is like the devil in food, right? Mm-hmm. So right. We know now that that's not going to help us.
Right.
But maybe things to avoid, things that we should have more of, mm-hmm. to kind of get an early idea, if anything, of what we can do. And then what are some of the signs that our gut health is not good? Mm-hmm. I know that a lot of what we've learned is through evaluating our poop.
Yeah.
Right? Or how often you go, how well you go, like all those factors, but actually analyzing the poop itself
right.
gives us a ton of information.
So much information.
But if you could touch on, how do we know that there's a problem?
Right.
What are some signs that maybe everybody else can rely on?
Sure.
And then what are some action steps that we can take to improve it?
So some common symptoms of dysbiosis, which is the term that means that your microbiome ecosystem is not well balanced, right? It's dysbiosis, it's dysfunctioning. And some of the symptoms of that are bloating, a lot of gas, because what that's telling you is the guys who make a lot of gas are in charge right now. And gas is a normal byproduct, but we don't want it in excess, right? So you're going to have bloating. You're going to have evidence of that mucosal barrier being damaged through issues with your skin. Some people get nutrient deficiencies because when that intestinal lining is disturbed, it can't properly uptake nutrients. And that's huge. It's like, oh, I eat this all the time, but then sometimes you eat something that's damaging that barrier. It's kind of contradicting all the good work that you're doing because it can't absorb it. So having some nutrient deficiencies, if you notice, like in your blood work. Another really common symptom of dysbiosis is brain fog, fatigue, because if you don't have the bacteria making those short chain fatty acids, you're actually not able to produce energy in the intestinal lining and this gets a little bit complicated and I want to try to simplify it, but essentially the bacteria are in an anaerobic environment. They don't have oxygen there. So the good bacteria produce those metabolites because they can do that and they can have the energy they need without oxygen. So you'll have low energy, some fatigue. brain fog. You're going to notice that your sleep isn't great, right? Because you don't have those bacteria making the melatonin and the serotonin that you need to kind of rest and digest. You know, some of the really easy ways to take care of that is to remove, is to remove processed foods. And he mentions sugar. Sugar is the ultra processed food, because what it is molecularly is the stripping of fiber, right? You take rice and you strip that of fiber, you're left with a simple carbohydrate, which is glucose, right? And so you're literally giving yourself more of the non-fiber than you need, which is going to wreak havoc. Eating fermented foods, right? Fermentation, it's been seen throughout our entire existence as humans, right? Sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, all these different forms of fermented foods. If you have a little bit of them, they're being fermented by the healthy bacteria and yeast that we need in our ecosystem. So it's a really good way to kind of get it in there to help support the ecosystem. Exercise is fantastic for our gut microbiome. That's because it promotes this intestinal mobility, which, now that we're talking about poop, when you don't have that intestinal movement, which is called peristalsis, you're going to get constipated. And one of the byproducts of dysbiosis is constipation or diarrhea. And so diarrhea is formed from a certain type of bad bacteria that produces these toxins. The toxins make you have diarrhea because it pulls water in to flush it out. Your body's like, I don't want this guy in here, let's get him out. Or you're going to have those stools that are really hard and round. And they're round because your intestine is literally rocking back and forth trying to move it. And so it forms these balls. So if you have like really compact poop, your intestines don't have the right bacteria to create the environment to promote movement of the intestine. And that's why you have constipation. Mm-hmm. So looking at, you want your stools to be soft. You want them to be uniform. And you don't want to have a lot of hard time getting them out. If you're constipated or you're having diarrhea, there's likely an imbalance in the ecosystem. Anything I missed?
Yeah, I think that no, you did great. But I do want to mention, we're used to thinking about, foods that help promote more or bring more bacteria into your system. I mean, I think most people think of yogurt right away.
Yes.
And I want to mention yogurt because yogurt with added sugar doesn't count.
That's right.
Right? That's like the majority of the yogurt on the shelves.
That's not yogurt.
Or sometimes they'll put like fake sugars in there, which have their own set of problems.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking like plain yogurt.
Yes, plain yogurt, which is really just a relationship between the fat and the protein in the milk and what the bacteria is doing to it. And you don't need anything else other than that.
Yeah.
And without bacteria, you wouldn't have yogurt. That's like such an important thing to remember. So that's a good way to get it into the body and kind of proliferate into the system. Yogurt's great. Kefir is great. It's another yogurt-based product. You can have water kefir if you're lactose intolerant. But, I mean, if you're lactose intolerant, obviously you don't want the yogurt. But regular kefir is without lactose. So you should be good there, too.
Okay.
One last thing. Sorry, I know we're running on the edge. But having a diversity in what you eat will promote a diversity in your gut. And you want that diversity. You want the diversity of the good. So eating broccoli every single day is great, and I love that. But if you could diversify your greens, diversify your fruits, you're going to, like the breast milk, have 200 different forms of fiber to feed the different families of bacteria in your gut.
Outstanding. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. And, we are going to give the opportunity to, I think, have more encounters.
Yeah.
So just stay tuned. We'll connect with you guys and give you the opportunity to meet Melody in person.
Yeah, I'd love to.
We don't have anything set yet, but we'll let you know. So that way you can ask questions and we can maybe put on more education as well, so you can learn some more. We can learn too. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I learned a lot today.
Yeah. Good. I'm so glad. And if you want to up your learning at home, I really recommend this book, Fiber Fueled. It does a fantastic job of really characterizing the relationship between fiber and our bacteria. So with that said, I wish you guys the best. God bless, and thank you for having me today.
Thank you.